in bans for the first game. It's LeBlanc banned away by Team Dignitas. Cloud9 takes Zac off the table, and Dig's going to remove Syndra now. A very similar strategy to what we saw them do against TSM yesterday.
Yeah, and something that I think is also developing on patch 7.14 is I think blue side's a little bit more favored than in previous patches, and that's because you see all these bans right now are fairly standard bans that you would used to be seeing. Zac, Caitlyn, LeBlanc, Syndra. However, whenever there is a bunch of power picks, blue side having the first access to whatever they think the most OP thing is generally signals a small advantage for that side. So you can see now, you know, Elise, Caitlyn, Zac are banned, but that does leave Maokai and Cho'Gath up, and there we go, right away, Maokai could be the first pick.
Maokai picked up and locked in for Dignitas. We saw them play it to smashing success yesterday, but that does mean that Kalista, that ever-popular AD carry these days, is available for C9.
Yeah, always get to trade something back. Caitlyn banned, Kalista probably the next best AD carry on the block. Can't synergize it with the Thresh.
Okay.
And Contractz is all aboard the Kayn hype train. Happy to see it again.
He took no time locking that in either.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wasn't sitting around thinking, okay, do we want to go for Cho'Gath? Do we want to go for something else? Nope. Automatically going for the Kayn. He likes his champ.
Yeah, when you're the first one to feel like, when you have a jump in understanding on a champion over the opponent, it's even more reason to lock it in if you think it's good, because not only will you know what you're doing, there's a chance that the opponent doesn't know what you're doing, which then makes you even stronger.
The surprise factor can actually do a lot in terms of accomplishing outplays and making those big moves, but Dignitas going to go ahead, lock in the standard pick these days against Kalista. They grab that. Many, many players are comfortable taking Tristana into it.
Yeah, it's a decent laning phase. Then the lane kind of becomes a little bit more decided by the supports. The Nunu jungle for Shrimp. Now, this is a non-trivially nerfed Nunu. Lower health, going to be lower health in the jungle, so more prone to maybe losing duels to Kayn early on in the game, but it still gives them a monster tank line now. Nunu jungle, Maokai top.
Very difficult to get through those two and make your way onto the Tristana with how much protection they provide, but speaking of protection and tanky champions, Cloud9 picks up the Galio.
Yeah, I mean, if they decide to throw that in the mid lane, I think it will be Jensen's first Galio of the split. Impact has played it 3 times, but more recently, we have been seeing it mostly in the mid lane. Galio versus Maokai top lane would just be a tank for tank battle, so there's a real chance they throw it up there. Would be interested to see, though, if Jensen ends up going with a more supportive style.
And that's so different for Cloud9. I mean, Jensen, he's been the guy that we always talk about for this team this split, who's doing the carrying. When Jensen goes off, Cloud9 can win. And if he's not on a carry-style champion, you have to wonder what will be the win condition for this team. But going into the second part of the bans now, mid lane, again, the focus. Orianna and Cassiopeia banned away. Yeah,
it looks from the bans, though, that Team Dignitas is not buying it. They're saying that the Galio is going top lane. You think even back to when Lulu was meta, it wasn't something Jensen would play in the mid lane. So the more we think about it, especially even with banning Lucian away, Jensen's wanting to go mid lane with something else.
It's so opposite his usual style that it would be a serious departure to see him take this Galio into the mid lane against Team Dignitas in this match that's so important for both teams in terms of proving that they're not just a middle-of-the-pack, scrape-by qualifier for playoffs, but they really do belong in that top-of-the-table conversation. One ban left for Dig, and it goes towards Kassadin, another mid lane.
Yeah, well, with that many mid lanes being banned, you're trying to get rid of pretty much anything they think Jensen could carry the game with. 4 mid lane bans on the side of Team Dignitas, 2 mid lane bans on the side of C9. So we're going to be dealing with technically 7th and 8th mid laners in the meta. Taliyah is one of the top 3, I would say, meta mid laners, which would be why C9 is willing to pick it now instead of waiting for a counter pick, because there are so many mid lane bans.
That means that Dignitas is going to have an interesting job here deciding what they want to take into that Taliyah. It does confirm our suspicions, though, that Galio will be heading into the top lane. Post-nerfs, though, with the changes to Doran's ring and everything else with the champion, he has a bit harder of a time up there than he did back when we saw him be the eternal top laner. So what does Dignitas want to take into that? Jayce picked up for this team, so some powerful solo carry potential.
Maybe just going for a poke team that has an initiation option. Adrian cycling all the meta supports right here, and this is going to dictate what type of team they really want to play. Janna would be very low on damage and hard to start fights with, so there's a chance he goes with one of those melee initiators and just go even more of a tank ball, since C9 doesn't have huge DPS with their team so far. Alistar for Adrian.
Alistar going in. One of those champions that can really cause a lot of disruption with his diving capability. His turret diving especially is just absolutely ridiculous. Forget diving past the front line of enemy champions. Go underneath the turrets, pop the ultimates, just be that disruptor. Cloud9 now thinking about what they will take into that. Support their final pick here. Braum being hovered, and it looks like they locked that in. Yeah,
well, it's a triple front line for Team Dignitas, but then double AD carries, and Braum is really good against Jayce. Jayce's accelerated shock blast are his main sieging tool, and when you get a lot of CDR on Braum, you can block most of them actually with your Braum shield to kind of save your team entirely. So I can see why C9 would go for that here. Still synergizes pretty well with the Kalista, and since it's melee versus melee, they're not necessarily going to lose the lane. So I like the Braum choice by Smoothie.
One thing I want to keep my eye on, Jatt, as we get into game at the very start, is to see if these two supports go for their traditional supportive items or if they opt in towards the coin. Because we've seen supports that normally don't even think about the coin start to go towards the coin in this patch just because of how much gold it generates for you.
Yeah, Alistar could be one because then you get the Talisman of Ascension upgrade if you really wanted the move speed, boost yourself into the team. Don't think Team Dignitas is going to have an initiation problem, though, with Acceleration Gate and a Righteous Glory build on the Maokai. So I'd expect both these melees to go Targon since they're very core melee tank supports.
Absolutely. Ssumday on that Maokai, like we mentioned when he first picked it during Champion Select, had a lot of success yesterday against TSM. Such a disruptive force in these team fights. Got a lot of good ultimates as well. Those Maokai ults have actually helped Dignitas become so decisive in their objective calls as well. We saw yesterday they were willing to jump on the Baron and jump on the turrets because they knew they had that extra resource at their disposal.
Yeah, the big question for Team Dignitas here is, are they going to have enough damage? It's Keane and Altec who are really dealing the most of it. Maokai doesn't do a huge amount. Nunu and Alistar incredibly low damage. So if Impact gets armor stacking early, as well as Smoothie with the Knight's Vow early, it's going to be really hard for Team Dignitas to break through that C9 front line.
Exceptionally difficult. By the way, you were right. We do see the coin start on Alistar.
Wow.
But Braum will not opt for it.
Yeah, I mean, if we were going to see it on someone, I thought it would be Alistar, but I wasn't expecting to see it. That also can speak to Adrian wanting to play the lane a little bit more back, and maybe we'll see Sneaky and Smoothie just have that early advantage, and we're going to see what's up with Impact as it looks like the pause is for his issue.
Yeah, we just were informed that Impact is having some monitor issues right now, so we've got our tech guys on stage working to remedy that and hopefully get us back into game as soon as possible. But just want to do a quick comparison from what we saw yesterday, because we have a very small sample size to talk about in terms of comparing coin to the other supportive items, but there were a couple times yesterday where we compared the gold that the supports had earned through their items specifically, and the coin users were sitting on 1,400 when the other support item users were around 600, even 500.
Yeah, the main comparisons we've seen have been coin to Spell Thief's Edge a lot of times, and we've also seen coin users upgrade to Nomad's Medallion, the second tier in that line, much more quickly, because when you do that, you get 40 gold per gold coin drop, and then also the mana is something like 15% of your missing mana. But when you're picking up those coins fairly frequently, it is the most gold generating of all of the items. So on top of that, when you complete it into your warding item, the Eye of the Oasis, it's a 1,900 gold total cost, whereas you look at what happens with the Targons or the Spell Thief's Edge, and it's around 2,200 or 2,300 gold for that. So you're more efficient, you're getting more gold in general. It is something that has been an underbought item in the past, so I think it just kept getting stats and stats until people have started buying it, and we're definitely at that point now where it's probably even overtuned because champions who you would historically think should be going Spell Thieves or going Targons are now going coin.
Like that Alistar that we're seeing this game. Maybe he can make the plays happen on that. We'll be interested to see if he decides to go for the full Talisman of Ascension or if he does just go for that Eye Evolution like you were talking about. Instead, Ssumday with the teleport, Keane with the teleport, so they've got an extra global up over their opponents, but remember that Jensen on Taliyah, the champion can always get around the map and get where she needs to go with the Weaver's Wall.
Yeah, and I really want to see where Contractz goes with his early jungle path. He was able to play the Kayn with the Maokai on Friday and got some very beneficial pulls thanks to Maokai saplings. I wonder if Ssumday will try and do a similar thing for Shrimp here. There have been some very creative things that people have done with saplings, but based on the fact that we're 1 minute, 20 seconds in and Ssumday still hasn't tossed a sapling anywhere, they're not getting that creative. you can start placing your saplings at 108, and they will still be able to spawn and hit a jungle camp for you. Looks like he's just going to give an auto attack pull, and he starts Q for more laning power. No sapling magic for Ssumday.
Fans think Cloud9 has a serious edge in this matchup. 73% of them believe that they will walk away with the win here, work towards getting themselves back up towards those top areas of the standings, I should say. Cloud9's been one of those teams that, although they've had rough times in the past, there's still a team that's always on everyone's radar, just because of their history, what they've managed to accomplish before, especially, you know, being the team that came in second last split, looking to make another playoff run this time around.
Yeah, Contractz off to a very good start. He actually got a Galio Q on his Raptors to help speed him through that, so you can see he's cleared 2 camps faster than Shrimp has cleared 2 camps. So Contractz immune to the nunu counter jungling so far. He's going to be able to clear his pretty much entire jungle before nunu can make his way to any counter jungling.
Fantastic news for Cloud9. I mean, when your opponents pick a nunu and that nunu can't cause any headaches for your jungler early on, that's just wonderful momentum for you. I one time heard it on Reddit, I think, expressed that the goal of nunu is to make the other jungler as useless as you are.
And Contractz is actually trying to counter jungle Shrimp. If he doesn't, smart ward by Shrimp, knowing he was a little slow on that side of the jungle, but Contractz going for it.
Contractz getting some damage down onto this guy, forcing him out of his own jungle. Teaching him, this is why you don't play nunu, because you're going to get nunu'd.
Yeah, Contractz talks about how fast Kayn can clear in the early game. Notice the AoE he gets on this camp fairly easily, clears the whole camp away pretty effortlessly.
That Reaping Slash, very, very useful for taking down those small raptors as well as getting 2 hits down onto the big one. And now he'll continue just staying in the jungle of Shrimp, looking potentially for the red buff, or maybe to just hang around and see if Shrimp comes back.
Yeah, well, he has lane pressure in the mid lane, which is going to help him out with this one, but Shrimp has consumed Smite. So unless he's able to force him away from it, there's no way he'd be able to secure this red buff.
It will be a 2-on-2. Contractz taking a lot of damage, though. They may be able to finish him off here, but a nice heal from the Smite will keep him topped off and get him out of trouble. Shrimp still chasing, but no real kill potential on a nunu alone.
Yeah, Contractz definitely got too greedy there. The ward was seen by Smoothie when Shrimp walked over the red buff, so they overly dove there, and now you're right where you don't want to be against nunu, where he's just meandering into your jungle at full health.
Losing that momentum, even for a minute, can give him the chance to run into the jungle and just start doing what he picked this champion to do. The more he can deprive those resources and take those away from Contract's hands, the more he can set him behind and try to render this Kayn useless. Because remember, Kayn's a champion that can fall pretty far behind.
Yeah, and we got to watch out for Shrimp up in this top side. They could get a good gank in onto Galio here. Ssumday doesn't have a huge amount of mana, but he can force the flash.
They're onto him, but they have such little damage between the two of them. They hurt him for 1/3 of his health bar. That was just super underwhelming.
Yeah, Ssumday low on mana. Nunu is nunu. This is maybe a sign of things to come if the game doesn't snowball out of control for Team Dignitas. Because there's not much that they can get through Galio with, especially if he starts stacking a little bit of armor. This bottom lane also, for Dig, shouldn't actually win. Alistar's early laning phase, not as strong as Braum's early laning phase, and Kalista very good at laning from ahead. We're definitely going to be trying to use the coin to equalize the gold in that lane a little bit. Altec and Adrian have won most lanes they've been in so far, but this matchup is just not favorable.
It's taking its toll right now. 42-36 in the CS department, so nothing super crazy there just yet, but it is a bit of a worrying trend to already start falling behind 5 minutes into the game as Jensen moves into the enemy jungle to take care of some of those blast cones, just limit the mobility of his opponents a bit more. Ssumday comes back to lane, utilizing the TP. Impact does the same. Catalyst done for Impact to allow him to have that extra lane sustainability.
Yeah, we don't see many Catalysts on Galio anymore. Maybe he'll build that into an Abyssal Mask to maybe help out the damage from Taliyah later, but I want to see him armor stacking this game, so I'm a little surprised he's gone with the Catalyst early instead of even just rushing toward the Righteous Glory, because I don't think Maokai will have any kill pressure on Galio, almost regardless of what Impact builds.
Well,
to see where he goes with that.
Playing it safe against his lane opponent. Like you said, providing that multiplier for Taliyah once they get into the team fights, but that does mean he'll be squishier against the vast majority of the damage from Dignitas when these mid-game fights eventually do happen. Cloud9 have farmed themselves up a 500 gold lead already, though, You can see the CS advantages in every single lane for this Cloud9 team, which goes back to what you mentioned during our pre-game conversation, where Cloud9 has a lot of individually talented players. These guys are among some of the best in their roles. It just hasn't been gelling as a team so far.
Yeah, they haven't been able to put that many wins together. A lot of that has had to do with the instability in top lane. Neither Impact nor Ray have had good splits. Jensen as well, for as good as he's been, hasn't picked up a first blood all split. So not too many people are making the plays for them in these games.
Shrimp will clear out the ward placed down by Cloud9 in his own jungle.
Contractz really wanting to counter jungle Nunu is just really hard to do.
I mean, Smite Consume makes everything so difficult to try to fight for.
Trying to stop this from being passed off, which they do.
Weaver's wall comes in. Dignitas collapsing, though, trying to turn this into a 3v2. The fight comes out. Impact jumping up into the air with the hero's entrance, but the Maokai ulti also going to be locking these guys down. Contractz wants to escape here. Absolute Zero channeled, Reaping Slash to get himself out of the way of most of the damage. Impact now needs to get himself out with the flash. And somehow, Jatt, no one dies.
Yeah, and it's the second invade Contractz has done that has resulted in negative pressure play for his team. Team Dignitas has been able to collapse on the lanes pretty much as fast as C9 there, and no, you were not going to steal an objective away from Nunu. So technically they stopped the blue buff from going on to Jayce, meaning Contractz can give his own blue buff over to Jensen, maybe if Shrimp doesn't contest it, but when Shrimp hit level 6, things got bad pretty quickly there for C9, and some slippery moves by Impact allowed him to escape that one.
One of the uses of Nunu is you can try to ninja these dragons away by yourself very early and very safely, but Smoothie gets himself in there to make sure he stops that, as now they find the catch out onto Sneaky, who's going to pop the flash, looking to escape, but he cannot do it! And first blood goes to that Dignitas bottom lane that has been doing so much work lately.
Altec and Adrian getting aggressive, and they catch Sneaky unawares. That was a moment where Smoothie had blast coned over the wall to stop Shrimp. So Adrian and Altec knew he would be alone. Therefore, Sneaky shouldn't actually be pushed up this far. A simple combo from Adrian. They flash follow for a little bit of extra damage. They burn 3 summoner spells, but they get that first blood.
And getting that onto these two that you mentioned were falling behind a bit in the tempo of the bottom lane will now put them back in a spot where they can contest that priority. They can make sure that they're putting up a fight in the 2v2. And Altec, remember, this guy's on a late game hyper-scaling carry. He can get very scary if allowed to scale up and have those resources.
Yeah, and Team Dignitas still needs to continue to scale. A tier was just completed onto Keane to go along with his serrated Dirk. He's not going to be much of a lane bully for a while. They're going to need to generate some pressure with Adrian, and obviously level 7 Shock Blast still pretty effective even with the tier, but they need to develop the pressure elsewhere on the map and maybe try and work around with his Nunu, because I still don't think they have that much damage in the late game.
Cinderhook is done for the Nunu, so he's starting to get that tankiness he needs. Sneaky gets jumped on again by Altec. Smoothie once more out dealing with that Nunu, just absorbing some of the pressure created by the fact that Nunu exists. And Nunu does put his opponents in that kind of a situation, right? When you're Nunu on the map early on, you can take objectives so incredibly easily, your opponents have to take measures against you or risk losing out on those objectives.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see who can get a pick before going for this Drake, because that'll dictate a lot of it. Very dangerous to start straight up against a Cloud Drake.
Contractz gets very minor damage onto Keane, but Shrimp is ready and waiting to make sure that they can't start that 2v1 against the Dignitas mid laner, as the unempowered Shock Blast does not find its way onto anyone. Smoothie and Sneaky moving up. Adrian doesn't have the most health to work with here in this fight, but he will have the Alistar ultimate if he needs to make that one happen. Sneaky getting himself knocked back. This is a 3 versus 2 for now. Smoothie trying to jump away. Adrian likely going to die first. Sneaky grabbing the kill there as Ssumday pops off the ultimate, trying to jump now onto Sneaky. Smoothie dropping the Keane as a double kill comes out for Dignitas' mid lane. Impact in the middle of 4 men. He will not stand for long, and Altec makes this a 4-1 game.
C9 getting caught in another big fight. Adrian gives up his life, but the team wins the fight in a big way. Keane faster on the bottom lane roam than Jensen's Taliyah, so comes in to clean up that fight and really turn the tides. And with this turret, if they can take this with Trist and Maokai, which they should be able to, they jump out to that big early game lead that they would need to snowball with their composition.
Trist shoots really fast to begin with rapid fire, but you put a Nunu Blood Boil on top of her, she is a machine gun to take down these objectives.
And then can keep shooting fast. So what a start right here. And just looking at the start of this fight, it looked favorable for C9, honestly, because even if Alistar ults, you can keep stacking the Kalista spears in, so you expect them to get the kill afterwards. But then watching this, right, Contractz jumps in, doesn't get a whole bunch of work done into Shrimp, and then the Shock Blast actually beats the Taliyah wall into that fight. Sneaky, yes, picked up one kill on the backside, but then Shrimp, Altec, Keane, and Ssumday just kind of gang up on Impact after he ulted in on Galio.
You said it at the start, seeing the Jayce arrive to the fight first, too. I mean, beating Taliyah to a fight.
Going in again.
Sneaky now jumped on, slammed around, and beaten down. Adrian kills him for the second time this game. Support Alistar, 2-1-2, the real carry in the bottom lane.
Chaining CC with Alistar and Ssumday just arriving to this fight. You would expect him to go bottom in a lane swap situation, not rush top lane, and leave Galio alone. So a peculiar move by Ssumday pays off in a big way. So not only do they get bottom turret and Cloud Drake, they now get Rift Herald and top turret. They're getting all of the objectives.
This is what I was praising Dignitas so much for yesterday. You would see them make a play, and it's not just, okay, we killed somebody, cool, let's take our 300 gold and buy a cloth armor. It was, we killed a guy, now we're gonna make the call. We're getting objectives, there's real progress happening. This team is looking like such a strong unit as a whole.
Yeah, and early on in this game, Shrimp's Nunu hasn't been shut down, if that's weird, because normally you'd expect Nunu to try and shut down the Kayn, but you look at what Contractz did with Kayn on Friday, and he was constantly in the enemy jungle, shutting them out of the game and taking over from a pressure perspective. And in the post-game interview, he was asked, how do you see Shrimp? And he says, well, he plays Nunu, have to watch out for that. He had a plan against Nunu. He thought he was going to invade him, but it just didn't work against Shrimp's Nunu, and now every skirmish is being controlled by the CC tanks of Team Dignitas, and it's allowing the time they need for Keane and Altec to do the damage.
And one thing I want to mention about Kayn, because we haven't got to have a lot of conversations about him before since he's such a new champion, and only Contractz has played him in the NA LCS. When this champion falls behind, remember he gets his evolution orbs. Uh-oh, Smoothie. Getting some auto attacks there from Altec, but Kayn's evolution orbs and his points come from dealing damage to enemy champions. If you're so far behind that you're avoiding fighting enemy champions, your evolution will be delayed, making you significantly weaker.
Yeah, going to be going red Kayn, almost certainly. And it is good late game to be able to soak a bunch of damage in a team fight, ult into a tank, come back out at near full health. But that works, once again, when you're ahead and when you have clean ways of initiating onto the team that can be helped via Maokai. So one big thing there is just Team Dignitas having the Maokai locked in, and that's another thing contributing to Contractz' rough early.
Now I want to ask you about this one, because we just saw Contractz complete his tier 2 boots, but he went with a Mercury Tread to stop some of the CC potentially from Ssumday, from Adrian. But both of the enemy damage sources are auto attackers. Yeah. Is Ninja Tabby the better buy here? Yeah,
I think that's a tough thing to say. As Kayn, who's a melee damage dealer, if you get kited, you're useless. So Nunu, Maokai, Alistar, I think definitely warrants Merc Treads. This is one of those games where you'd like to buy both, but I can see the Merc Treads being totally fine. Here comes Rift Herald, mid lane.
Rift Herald summoned up by Dig as they've got the 5-man push to make sure Shelly gets him at least something. Charging in there with the headbutt. The turret is slammed down. Do they want to stick around and try to get more for it? Looks like they might. A lot of times these days you'll see the Rift Herald summoned, it'll get one turret and then they'll abandon it, but they want to make sure that it at least gets that second headbutt.
They're going to keep pushing a little bit. I mean, Altec getting some shots into the turret, since the Rift Herald does give that backdoor bonus removal for turrets. So they get 2/3 of the second tier. Worthwhile to stick around and get that little bit of extra damage.
Not bad at all, honestly, for Team Dignitas. 4,000 gold up, 15 minutes in. Duskblade completed on Keane. This item is one that we've had or seen at least a lot of conversations about since 7.14. It is so incredibly strong, especially if you can manage to duck into a bush, get the proc back and ready to go again more than once in a fight.
Yep.
Whoa.
Agreed. He's going to be stacking lethality as well, knowing the only guy who can build armor on C9 is Impact. Smoothie too far behind the curve currently to start getting armor. And Impact did complete that Abyssal Mask. So going for a magic resist item first against this team, I generally disagree with. You can see him falling pretty easily in the fights he's been a part of. He could have a frozen heart at this stage of the game if he so chose, but instead just has an Ninja Top.
And that's just going to complicate Cloud9's teamfight situation. Look at how much damage that Empowered Shock Blast did. That had to be 45% of Jensen's health.
Yep, 50 at least. I mean, got every rank into Shock Blast, has lethality stacking up. So he's currently got 58 armor penetration at his current level, and Jensen has 46 armor. So, well, effectively, he is doing true damage to Jensen with these items.
That is not a happy place to be if you're Cloud9, and especially if you're one of these squishier carries. And honestly, everybody's squishy at this point. Like you just mentioned, Impact with the Abyssal Mask means that Cloud9's in a spot where these upcoming fights are almost unfightable for them if they get poked at all, because nobody can absorb the Shock Blast. Even if Impact gets hit by him, if he's taken 500 damage from a Shock Blast, that's not really an acceptable outcome.
Okay, Keane actually had a really powerful point. He's down in CS, but he has the item breakpoints right now before the base armor has caught up to his lethality level. So dealing true damage or better to some if you can take them to negative armor. Here we go.
Pushing onto the tier 2. Dignitas needs a couple more hits, or they may just be able to take it with the explosive charge, and they do. Now Adrian the target as Cloud9 looks to mount their counterattack. Heroes entrance into the fight to make sure they've got the front line once they get there.
They're going to re-engage here. Here comes the
auto
Maokai
attacks. Maokai ultimate coming in from the side. Who's it going to catch? Multiple people. It looks like 3 different ones get tied up. Contractz in retreat as Dignitas manages to turn this one around. A killing spree for Keane. Smoothie off on the side. Contractz 2 and Impact now being chased down by multiple members of Dig. Altec with the flash of the kill.
And Team Dignitas is getting whatever they want. C9 burn almost everything engaging on that fight. Ssumday somehow went down during that chase. Looks like to Contractz, probably got him with the cheeky ultimate, but he will probably fall when all is said and done.
Yeah, he'll stand there and try to fight it out, but there's no way away from 3 members of Dignitas. A 3-for-1 going Dig's way. Just disaster for Cloud9. 6,500 gold now, and the advantage of Dig. Baron's not even available yet. They can't even try to go for a big neutral objective because they're this far ahead this early.
Yeah, plus they'll have Nunu when they do go for the Baron to get that secure. Jensen can't even keep the red buff of the team alive. This gold lead has gotten out of hand. Watch this one more time. C9 burn pretty much everything going for Adrian. They don't have a clean line for Altec or Keane, but they can't cut him off, and they use all their initiation here. And by the way, here comes Maokai, has the angle on the ultimate so people can't escape. Ends up rooting most of the team with it, gets 3 of the roots to connect, goes for sneaky, they can follow it down with a bunch of damage. Let's see how Ssumday ends up falling here. Just Taliyah plus Contractz pops in.
Oh, the fail flash too. Tried to get himself over the wall, but tried to flash the fat part instead of that little skinny zone that you can actually get over. Unfortunate for him, but still a minor loss considering the win they found overall in that fight. Spirit Visit done for him now. Working on that Righteous Glory next.
And by the way, he doesn't have flash.
He has been caught out. Weaver's Wall will block away his path.
He's going to
throws out the grasping roots as Ssumday will buy as much time as possible. Keane arrives, and it gets turned around yet again as Jensen falls, but Keane will go now too. The shutdown credit for Impact as Contractz gets shot down by Altec, who now has free firing time onto this very low armored Galio, and Cloud9 again lose 3-for-1.
That's just not right.
No,
it just doesn't
not at
feel
all.
Right. Maokai is so tanky. He's got a Visage and a Glacial Shroud. Definitely worthy of the first pick. Ssumday knowing this champion. Impact knows it as well. He was picking it all over the place on Friday, but C9 opted for other bans this game. Ssumday's gotten going a little bit. They just do not have the damage to take him down. Now they turn for Baron.
Now we get to see what we were potentially thinking about a couple of minutes ago. Baron only live for 20 seconds before the Dignitas team turns their attention towards it. Already have it below half HP, and Cloud9 just retreats. They don't really have any sort of a chance to contest here.
Yeah, I mean, it's against a nunu. Very rarely in situations where there's 1,000 damage, true damage secures do you see steals. It has happened, though.
We have to preface that with it has happened now, though, because...
and here they cut Ssumday off entirely. He has no flash, but he says, okay, at this point his Sat Magic heals for so much, and he also has the Curve to Colossus Shield. They end up only getting half his health in 4.5 seconds for Keane's teleport to complete. They finish off Jensen first, ensure they trade a kill around, but C9 has Braum and Kalista up on the top side of the map, and Team Dignitas can collapse everyone down faster, so it looked like a 3v1 turns into a 5v3, and this preps the Baron for Dignitas.
More solid team play from Dig, just fight after fight after fight, puts them in an 11-3 lead over Cloud9, 4 turrets to 0. as they now push up this mid lane onto the tier 3. This is the power of the Tristana and the Jayce Siege machine. We were talking about the attack speed earlier, the shock blast with the lethality, and Cloud9 can't even try to hold this line. Yeah, Inhibitor now under pressure.
Cloud9 is down 10,000 gold at 21 minutes. This is not your standard type of deficit. This is a incredibly snowballed game for Team Dignitas, and they have the tanks to accelerate the pace of the game. One thing we've noticed is patch 7.14 so far has had the fastest games on average of the year, and it looks like we could see another one right here. It's because when you're getting ahead with these Maokai, Nunu type compositions, the turrets can become irrelevant, not to mention Tristana is so good at taking them down. So expect Team Dignitas to continue to power down these turrets and try and get a quick victory.
Sneaky just lost 60% of his HP from a single shock blast as Dignitas continue pushing. Weaver's wall comes out, the Maokai ultimate launched out as the counterattack. Absolute Zero instantly going to be interrupted as Impact dies before he can make his hero's entrance. 1-for-1 so far, but Dignitas continues the pressure. Contractz having to run away after losing his AD carry. Smoothie on the front line, but not for long. Altec cashing in for the 6th time. And Dignitas wants to end this game. 22 minutes in, Jensen and Contractz only gets away because he can run outside of the playable map.
And even then, he could have gotten hit by a shock blast. They're going for more.
Adrian trying to go in, finish these guys off, make sure there's no chance at all for Cloud9 to survive here, but I don't think that's even required. Nexus turret, only one left standing, the Nexus. Now the target for Dignitas. Impact alive in 2 seconds. Same for the rest of the team, but it does not matter. And Dignitas have a swift victory in game 1.
Swift is almost an understatement. That was a 23-minute victory for Team Dignitas. They obliterate C9. It was a small early advantage that just turned into the game in what felt like an instant.
And it wasn't looking like that at the very, very start. We've mentioned how Cloud9 had a bit of a gold lead. They were farming up better in the lanes. Until the action actually broke out, Cloud9 was doing fine. And then as soon as it did, Dignitas never lost that tempo. They never lost that momentum.
Yeah, C9 had 3 pushing lanes at the start of the game and an invading jungler. So that is a recipe where C9 has been able to win many games this split. Sometimes the invading jungler's Nunu, it's a little more reliable for the buff secures, but none of the invades worked for C9. All of that advantage was translated into failed invades, which, while not disastrous, stopped them from pulling ahead in the game. And then as soon as a few skirmishes went against them, the lethality technically hit a snowballing point. I don't agree with some of the item choices that C9 made. Impact's Abyssal Mask, pretty lackluster, was unable to block any of the shock blasts, which then kept hitting the squishies and totally taking them off of turrets. And then on top of that, Altec and Adrian consistently have been lights out since they've turned into this. They had a losing lane matchup, but they found first blood in a 2v1 situation and then roamed around the map expertly to close out that game.
And that Dignitas trigger pull that I'm talking about, whether it's going for objectives or going for sneaky, like you mentioned, as soon as they saw Smoothie dealing with Shrimp, having to keep the Nunu away from the Drake, they were like, oh, Sneaky's alone, kill him. First blood happens as soon as they decide to go for it, and from there, they just keep getting more and more and more.
And this is crazy, Captain Flowers, because this team was on a 4-match losing streak. They had fallen to, what was it, 5-5 as far as their match score?
It wasn't very good.
It was 5-5, and I want to know what this team did with the old Team Dignitas. Because those guys didn't seem to know what they were doing. Some days looked like he was on an island in these games. Keane and their bottom lane wasn't doing anything. They have swapped out their bottom lane entirely. So Altec and Adrian have been performing at such a high level. It seems that now that Shrimp is the sole guy and they parted ways with Chaser, that is, infused him with more confidence. It is a completely different team than what we saw 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I want to see if they can continue this because it's just the first game of the best of 3.
First game, but it went very, very well for Dignitas. For a deeper dive on that win, though, we're going to hand it off to Dash and Mark.
Thank you very much, Captain Flowers. Things continue to look good for Team Dignitas as they get another victory here over Cloud9. And as Jatt mentioned, with what was a pretty tame lane phase for a short period of time, immediately turns due to a single team fight. Where Dignitas gets the better of Cloud9, and then they're off to the races with their goal.
Right, there had been like a single solo kill where Sneaky stepped a little bit too far out, but then after that, it was just off to the races for Dignitas. That bot lane replay is really the one to look at, just because it kind of shows the strengths of this triple tank comp that Dignitas had put together. It starts out with C9 wanting to engage onto Adrian. He's going to have his ultimate available, so he's going to remain relatively tanky throughout this whole bot lane engagement. And then the one thing that goes wrong here, I'd say, for the side of C9 is that when Smoothie re-engages, he throws himself past Adrian and hits Sneaky. And that ends up with leaving Smoothie in the middle of the team, and now he's cut off with the Jayce collapsing. It also allows Ssumday to focus out by himself onto Sneaky and keep him out of the fight. So Keane gets there first, they're winning up in the top side of the river, while Sneaky can't get back in the fight on the bot side.
Right, you also saw Impact there choosing to use his ultimate to try and save Contractz, who ends up going down to a shock blast anyway, therefore removing himself from the area of the map where he's able to aid Sneaky in dealing with Ssumday, effectively zoning his own ADC out of the fight. Fight goes in favor of Team Dignitas. As was mentioned, they have the lead. And this is where I now want to return to Champions League and talk about Team Dignitas showing incredible mastery or understanding here in 7-14 so early on in terms of how to play on this patch.
Right, the first pick, Maokai, 3 games in a row for Ssumday. He's going to take it every game. They've already kind of said this basically through their pick ban, is that we think this champion's broken, we're going to keep taking it. Ssumday makes it look pretty good, so I understand their position on that. But then the rest of their comp fills in very well, where the Nunu has great zone control. If you look at the comp of C9, it's very short range. Taliyah, Kalista, Kayn, all basically, under 500, 600 range. And then Galio, Braum, the same thing. So if you ever can't get your engage off cleanly, you are not going to get through the Nunu. You're not going to get through the Alistar or Maokai. And then the Tristana is just going to blast you from range with the Jayce.
And again, a marked difference between Friday's games for Cloud9 and this one here is that Contractz didn't get off the ground on Kayn. Both games on Friday, we saw him get a couple successful early ganks off. Therefore, with some extra gold in his coffers, he's able to push that advantage as a more damage-oriented jungler. Here, he gets outpaced by those tanks, and we run into the classic issue where you don't have the damage to eat through the front line, and they have enough of a front line to mess with your back line.
Yeah, and it's hard to say because there is such a limited sample size on Kayn right now. The first 2 games that he played last series was, blue side. He got super leashes, got off the ground early and was ahead of the other jungler. This time, every time he tried to invade on Nunu and Dignitas just kind of reacted and collapsed on him, though they didn't ever end up losing a kill on the invades. A lot of times they lost summoners, and none of them turned out well. And we heard Contractz say in his interview he thinks Kayn needs to be played aggressively.
Right, and you spoke about that short range that we have here on Cloud9. That was evidenced at 7-14 into the game, a 3-for-1 in favor of Dignitas. Basically, Cloud9 choosing to take this engagement, realizing they don't have the tools to get in the way they need to.
Yeah, a couple times Dignitas had kind of just set up in the mid lane and siege the turret down. Finally, C9 gets sick of it. They try and pull the trigger once again onto a frontline member of Adrian, pops that ultimate, tanks a lot of that damage, and now all their engage tools are down.
Reset.
Yeah, fight's completely reset, and here's the re-engage coming in from Ssumday. Maokai drops his ultimate. They have so many more engage tools when you have multiple tanks that the Alistar had to use his stuff defensively, which sometimes is the end of a fight for a team. But because the Maokai is another tank who can bring more CC, he re-engages excellently from the flank. They get the first kill. Kayn is able to find a cleanup kill onto Ssumday, but he ends up putting himself out of position to do that, and the rest is Dignitas is going to collapse. This results in a 3-for-1, and it just kind of, like you said, illustrates how difficult it is to play against triple tank, and why I think I'm surprised I haven't seen more teams already just start spamming any tank they can play.
Yeah, especially when you see those short-range carries coming in early on in the draft, or things like Jin, which we've seen struggle against triple tank just because he can't outpace the tankiness with his damage. Noticing here, of course, lots of damage coming out of that Tristana, aided by the blood boil of the Nunu, a champion that's been picked up by Dignitas plenty of times, and they've shown mastery around it. A big thing here is that this game ended so quickly. Again, I'm continually impressed by Dignitas in that now we're starting to see them not even need, for example, that Baron to close out games.
Right, I mean, they did get the Baron in this game, but it wasn't one of their classic, oh, we're all inning at 22 minutes. Yeah, we're going to get it, force it, and if you stop us here, well, we probably lose the game.
Right.
Here, they built a significant lead just based off some good team fighting and sieging around mid. That makes the Baron almost free, and then they just set up again and start forcing down turrets.
Also, as we saw Altec picking up player of the game on your screen, one thing I want to recognize is the fact that Dignitas with Altec and Adrian, right? That we have to remember that Adrian coming into the roster, that's kind of the mark of where this team started re-picking up momentum and hitting this win streak. And so credit to them because something's working within this team with them on the roster.
Right, and I think you got to point to the bot lane here again, like we said, because they did get that first kill on the Sneaky. The first big skirmish in the game breaks out in the bot lane. Great TP by Ssumday to help support them, but already they were kind of outplaying C9, and then Altec stepping up huge, being the late game carry multiple times. I think he's grabbed a ton of player of the games in the past week and a half.
Well, Dignitas has snagged the first victory of the day. Meet us back here to see if Cloud9 can tie up the series in Game 2 versus Team Dignitas. Stay with us. You're watching the North American LCS.